Good morning and good Friday, last Friday of an important month, October, where many things happen. And we are very happy here to host this timely and important webinar as part of the ODIN webinar activities, because we are in a very important moment, I would say Europe and worldwide, where many interesting and game-changing regulations are going to take place, and this will dramatically have effect, positive effect, if we do the job properly in our healthcare systems in terms of results for patients and citizens, and also for the professionals working with them, and for the ecosystem that are interacting with them. So there will be in the coming days and months key enabling technologies that will impact, hopefully, such ecosystems. But we need to work with all the stakeholders and to ease their job in using these technologies properly. So being able to navigate and to really understand the meaning of the impact and the translation into human wordings, even the new landscape of regulations is of utmost importance. So I will give the floor to our hospital and large-scale pilot manager of the ODIN project, Professor Leandro Pecchia, to give these important perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe. So thank you for this invitation and for agreeing to have a shared moment for discussion on this very important topic, as Giuseppe said. So I must say that's one of those in which we really don't know enough. I don't know where I'm sharing my screen, but okay, now we are. We really don't know enough, yet there is a call for action. So we cannot further wait, but we really need to start putting ourselves in the mindset that AI is something tangible, and we need to rush in order to regulate this important key enabling technology, because if we don't do that, we may end up lagging behind compared to other realities which are working in this field, not in Europe. And we risk that if we don't regulate that, we will be following other people doing that, and that our values are not really taken into account into the way in which this domain is regulated and ruled. So, as I said, we don't probably have yet all the answers, but I want to bring you today in a journey on what are the underlying regulatory frameworks that I think we should keep in mind when then we will arrive to a proper AI regulatory act in Europe that we hope will be in less than 1 year time. So before I start, allow me to say a few words about myself. There are some in the floor which I've never seen before. So I am Leandro Pecchia. I'm a professor of biomedical engineering. I have been teaching in Fico University, graduated in Napoli, Federico II, then moved to Sheffield, Nottingham, Warwick, where I still hold a part-time. Spent the last 3 years at the World Health Organization, and since 18 months, I'm now in Rome, Università campus Bio-Medico in Rome, where I am chair of biomedical engineering. Because of that, I am mainly involved in 2 labs. The one in Warwick that I am not at, which now is coordinated by Davide Piaggio, and the one in Rome, which is just starting and is growing fast. I myself have been working on AI since my master project, basically, and applying my knowledge to the field of medical device. It probably was not my choice, but in 2007, Europe introduced the concept that the software in health is by definition a medical device, and this cascaded my work into the domain of medical device. And then I decided to deepen the topic and invest more of my time into the space of regulatory science. And then I do other things such as biomedical engineering for global health, but this is not for today's discussion. Because of that, I hold and part of a wider and wealthy ecosystem in which we do research, leveraging on private and public funds, with a portfolio altogether worth of a few millions of euros, mainly research in which we apply key enabling technologies such as AI and IoT into health and well-being. Yet, as many engineers, my lab is what you see. Sorry, I don't know if you see. Oh, there we are. Vi voglio togliere questo davanti. Sorry, some technical issue in the room, but I think now we have solved it. Okay. Okay, but as any engineer, my workshop looks like that. My workshop in Warwick, the one in Rome, it's still under construction. So a real workshop in which you can do whatever you can to measure whatever signal, both in lab and in real life. Now, you saw a few flags behind my name. It's worth spending a few words on what it is, the world ecosystem of biomedical engineering. That's what we are. We are bioengineers. And in Europe, we have a scientific society called EHDS, which is a federation of different national scientific societies of biomedical engineers, where also individual institutions can join. And this is part of the IFMB, IFMB being the World Global Scientific Society of Biomedical Engineering. And federated with IOMP, Scientific Society of Medical Physicists, we are united under the IUPES umbrella, International Union for Physics and Engineering Science in Medicine. And those are not just scientific societies, but those are NGOs in official relation with World Health Organization, with UNESCO through International Science Council, because first of all, we like to be good citizens, and we feel the responsibility to stand on our knowledge in order to make the world a better place. That's our philosophy. And I have been having few appointments in those associations. So if any of you is interested to know more, please feel free to approach me and I will be more than happy to share. Before I start, I really want to ask a few questions about what actually is a medical device and why we start from this definition when we think of artificial intelligence. And now, normally, the thing I ask to my classroom is to think a stretcher. Okay, a stretcher is a medical device which is normally used in order to bring people from wherever they are met in need of health support and bring them in a place where physically we can treat them much better. I see a few people in the room which have already been in this lecture, so please keep yourself silent. For those who have not been, please let me ask you this question. For you who have not been before in my classroom, if you make a do-it-yourself stretcher, would this be a medical device? Please raise your hand. And for those attending from home, please feel free to use the chat. And I ask Lydia, please, to let me know if there is any question in the chat or any comment. So what do you think? Is it a do-it-yourself stretcher a medical device? Raise your hand. Who believes so? Come on, don't be shy.
No.
No, there is a no. Why not?
It's just for important life. So each time it has changed.
So there is a comment from the floor, which I repeat for those which are attending online, which says no, because it would be not reliable the way in which you have manufactured it. And next time someone else does it, then it would be different. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is correct. The concept is not. So I agree with you. No, this is not a medical device, but for another reason. Any guess on the reason? Why I do agree with you that this is not a medical device? Any other perspective from the floor? Not even the guys which have been attending this lecture with me before. That's scary. Because it was not into the intended use of the guy who manufactured the jacket that this object was then used as a medical device. And now, if this is not into the intended use, I manufacture something because I wanted this to be a medical device. This is not important. Well, this is crucial. This is not trivial. The will which is behind the manufacturing of an object is defining the object. And as such, we enter into the domain of medical device if what we are doing is a medical device or not. there is another European regulation, for instance, the one about machines, okay, and defines a machine, whatever, as a part which is stuck and another which moves. Now, according to this definition, an elevator is a machine. But now, an MRI, magnetic resonance, is also a machine because it's a part which is stuck and another one which moves. But by definition, this is a medical device because the intended use of this machine is to do something in health care. So it's the way you intend to use the device, if you are the manufacturer, which make it a medical device or not, in theory. And then you have to do a few more things. But now, another question. Okay, we all agree this is not a medical device. But the next question is, okay, can I use this in case I need it? If there is someone in need to be moved from the garden to the hospital, and I know how to build a do-it-yourself stretcher because I've been a Boy Scout and I'm proud of that, can I use it? Guess. How many people think that we can use it? Raise your hand. So 2, 3, 4, 5, about, you know, one fourth of the room. Who thinks I cannot use it? Few more. Who has no idea? Okay, fair enough. So the concept is, yes, I can use it because if I have to save a life, I can use whatever I can. And if I'm a medical doctor, I must do whatever I can in order to save a life. If not, you know. But then the point is, who is responsible in case while transporting the patient with this device, the patient falls down and gets a more severe harm than the one he had before? Who is liable if this happens? Yes. Is it me? Is it the Moncler? Is it the nature for manufacturing the wood which I'm using? The patient, as my mom would have said, if you hurt yourself, I will keep you beating you. This was the pedagogic approach when I was young. No idea? The second answer. So if you manufacture this sub-object and you use it as if it was a medical device, now this is your fault. You cannot blame the Moncler. You cannot blame the tree. You cannot blame the patient. It is your responsibility. Now, let's apply this concept to something closer to today's topic. I take Python, which I know how to use. I make a model of AI. I use data, and I make a prediction. A doctor trusts me, and the patient dies. Can I do it? Yes, I can. Am I responsible for that, legally liable? Yes, I am. So I have to do something between me being able to code in Python and a doctor using this as if it was a medical device. Okay, that's exactly what we are here to discuss today. Now, this is very reasonable. So you gave me the right answer, even if it was for the wrong reason, sometimes fine. But this is so obvious that, you know, you gave me the right answer, even if you're not from this domain. But now, why then people are still confused? So the Apple Watch, it can now do ECG. Does anyone in the room has a smartwatch which can do an ECG or an heart rate or a step count or a sleep assessment? Raise your hand. So more than half, I would say, has used this before. I'm lying, less than half, but you don't see that. And so what's your opinion? Is this smartwatch a medical device? Yes. Someone has a different opinion? Should I pick and choose? Someone thinks that's not a medical device? No. Oh, no, there are a couple of people thinking that this is not a medical device. And I must say, I agree with you. This is not a medical device. This is not intended to be used as a medical device. The only thing which has been rated as a medical device, FDA approved in this case because we were in the States, is the algorithm which is behind, the algorithm for recognition of arrhythmia, okay? Which doesn't make the Apple Watch a medical device. The algorithm in its first embodiment was FDA approved. But now the same algorithm moved somewhere else requires you to have to go again through the process for making the new embodiment a medical device. So the fact that you are employing an algorithm into a smartwatch, and this algorithm has been before in another embodiment, which made it a medical device through a formal process, does not, so the transitivity probability does not apply. Can I be more clear than that? I think I have mainly engineers in the room. So transitivity property does not apply to the medical device regulation. Sorry, I have also a mathematician, so she can correct me if I'm... Transitivity properties does not apply to medical device. So if the algorithm is a medical device, the new embodiment does not acquire this quality of being a medical device. I can use atomic spider bits if you like more marble than mud. It's okay, but the concept stays the same. This is not a medical device. Yet there is a lot of confusion. Forbes is not Paperino, which I like, Mickey Mouse comics. Yet it's having a faulting title. Okay, it's not Nature, but then if you go on the Apple store, it clearly says, "Hey guys, this is not a medical device." I'm sorry, this is in Italian, but I'm sure you can find the same in UK, USA, wherever you. So even fact checking is not obvious in this domain. So there are people which have so confused the idea that they believe in whatever they believe. Okay, and we know, I mean, things about Novax. We are living strange world. So there are functions which you can do with an Apple Watch, which could have been done with a medical device, but this is not a medical device, which means that you can use it for sport. You can use it because you are curious. You can use it because you know, you want to check what your partner is doing, because you can also share remotely. But you cannot use it to make a diagnosis. You cannot use it to make a medical act, because if you do that, you are liable. Now, well, actually you can. You can do. Can in English is different than in Italian. It means you have the ability to do so. But because of that, doesn't mean that you are entitled to do so. Or if you do, you take your own responsibility while doing that. This is becoming more and more common. There are plenty of examples. I don't want to indulge more in this, but I think the idea is clear. And because of new technologies and the way you spread apps, you can install it by yourself. There has been this wild west of medical app, as it has been called, which seeks for sheriffs. Now, I think the concept is clear. Please check the facts. If you believe that something is a medical device, please be responsible in the way you use it. Before, we were having an exam and we were discussing the responsible silence. Sometimes the most responsible thing you can do is just not to do. And fine. Meanwhile, you have the right to do. Now, before we move forward, let's pretend again we are engineers, and let's start from definitions. What does it make a medical device? Well, we have this very clear definition in Europe, which says that the medical device means any instrument, apparatus, appliance, or software, including implants, reagent, material, and other articles, which are intended by the manufacturer to be used alone or in combination for human beings. If you are horses, you don't care, but I don't see horses in this room. Therefore, we are focusing on human beings. So only if you are intended to be used for one of those. I just took two, but there are 4 examples. If you think to a disease, what can we do for a disease with a medical device? Everything you can do with a disease with a medical device. Diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, prediction, prognosis, treatment, alleviation of a medical condition, okay? Of a disease. But the same for an injury or a disability. So prostheses, they are medical devices by definition. In this case, I do not have prevention if you check. So the diagnosis is there, monitoring is there. There is something in the middle, prevention. Why do you think that prevention is not into the remit of definition of medical device? A 3D printed prosthesis for preventing injury is not a medical device. Why? What it is then? No idea? Any guess? Any guess? Is a PPE, is a personal protective equipment, an object which is intended to prevent injury. It's not a medical device, it's a personal protective equipment. Masks, you have 2 families of masks. Surgical masks, those are medical devices. PPE masks, FFP 1, 2, 3, they are designed in order to avoid you, to prevent a risk, to prevent an accident or well, to prevent an accident, not a disease. If they're there to prevent a disease, they are a medical device. Is it clear the difference? Fine. Now, if I have a smartwatch intended for monitoring a disease, why this is a medical device? Because this is an instrument for monitoring a disease. So this is into the definition. If I have an app intended for predicting a disease progression, once again, that's a software for prediction of disease progression. If I have an AI system intended for monitoring an injury, fine, this is an apparatus for monitoring an injury or a software. And there is a fly which is interested to the top. Fine. Is it clear? Fine. Now, the problem is that the last European regulation on medical device, which was issued in 2017, does not mention the word artificial intelligence. So we have the most advanced regulation on the planet, if nothing else, because it's the last, which was written in 2007, published in 2017. And after initially 3 years, which became 4 because of COVID, has been enforced in all the member states. So this has been enforced in 2021, the 24th May 2021 is now called Medical Device Day. And 21, so less than 2 years ago, and it does not include the word AI, apart the fact that AI is eventually done through an instrument or a software, depending from the embodiment, and as such, the intended use make it a medical device if you're using it for a medical purpose. And that's an issue because we need to clarify more technical aspects which are pertinent for AI. So what I try to do here is to have an overview together with Alessia Mactaro, which helped preparing this topic, and we are working to deepen more this domain. First of all, let's start from the data. You need data in order to do any AI. And now the first thing I think in our domain, if I mention data, is the GDPR, European regulation for data protection and sharing, although people forget about the second part. Guido, I don't remember the surname, one of the 4 members of the Italian GDPR authority, he keeps saying that GDPR in the original title is for data protection and sharing. You don't need to protect the data if you don't need to share them. That's embodied into the definition of sharing, that now you need to protect it. So just because you need to keep your data somewhere because someone else has to use it in the same place or elsewhere, that's when the need for protection is coming out. So in the original idea of the GDPR, it was embedded the concept that we are protecting the data in order for them to be shared in the right way, according to human rights, intangible human rights, so even more difficult to be defined. But we only kept the first part in our mind, protection, which is creating a lot of barriers to the use of data in the world, in Europe in particular. So GDPR defines individuals' fundamental rights in the digital age, the obligation for those processing data, whatever it means, collecting data, storing data, transmitting data, analyzing data, viewing data, it's all in that, okay? Not just those collecting, but all have their own responsibility. And if this responsibility is spread across different units, you have now to have a data sharing agreement. So I collect the data, I have to sign with you an agreement in order to give you the data, even if anonymized. And you have to treat them, because in this agreement, at least we stay down that they are anonymized, so there is nothing that's for you to do. But we need to have an agreement in place, and yet the culture about the GDPR is not there. And then obviously it focuses on methods for assuring compliance to those principles, and obviously sanctions for those in breach of those rules, which were not defined from the European regulation, but delegated to member states, although the principles were there. GDPR structure, and you will see the same schema for the coming regulations that we are focusing on today. So the purpose is to ensure fair data management and exchange. Do you see that? It's point number 1. Fair data exchange is not forbidding exchange of data. So please help me in changing the mindset that people have in regard to GDPR. GDPR is not there to forbid data sharing. It's the other way around. It want to enable and foster data sharing by making clear, fair rules. If you don't need to share data, you don't need rules to protect data. It's easy. If there is something which doesn't exist, you don't need to protect it. But because you want to share, you need to protect. And second point is to protect data and people. Core principles, transparency, you need to know what I'm doing with those data. Lawfulness, I need to respect the law. Proposed limitation, you need to ask me only the data you need to ask me. I am having a quarrel since a week now with the company, which they want my data because they want to hire me as a consultant, and they send me a form which was not appropriate. They were asking my annual income. You don't need my annual income to give me a consultancy. So I said, no, I will not take this unless you send me the right form. It took me 1 week. And this is an important company. So still, people have the principles. They have. This company is one of the most amazing DPO in Italy. I'm honest, no? I know the DPO, and she's one of the best. But culture needs time to propagate within the same company. So now the guys in charge to take my information, to give me this consultancy, they have not digested what the DPO tells them, because they send me a form which is not appropriate. It was for company, probably for a company which is doing a consultancy for you. That's a lawful information. Yeah, probably it is. But for a person, no, this is not. So you cannot ask me my annual income because it's not important. You cannot ask me my sexual preferences. You cannot ask me my religion preferences because this is not important. That's it. So you have to be purpose limited in what you ask me. Data minimization, please keep my data only the ones you need and only for the time you need it. Then erase my data if you don't need it. Data accuracy, if you take my data, they have to be accurate. You cannot make a mistake and say that I am 2 meters tall. No, I'm just 1.89 meters. Storage limitation, I mentioned before, data integrity and confidentiality. You cannot share my data with someone else without my permission. Right of data subject, so the one owning the data keeps to be the owner of the data, so the one to whom the data belongs, so me. And I can access my data. I can ask you in any moment, hey, what data you have regarding myself? And you are obliged to give me this information. Otherwise, I can sit you. Right to erase. I can ask you to erase all the information you have about me. Data portability. I can ask you to give me my own data. You are in hospital. You are treating me. You have a lot of my sensitive information. I go living in USA for my job. I have the right to ask you to bring with me my data. It's your problem how, but I mean, write them in a stone if you like, but you need to give me my data back. That's one of my rights. Obligation to processing and automated decision-making. So this is limited by the regulation. You cannot just profile me because you have to do marketing. I need to know that. If you are profiling me, I need to know how you are profiling me. And you are not entitled to do that. There are sentences in Italy which belongs to the remit of profiling patients without them to know. At least they have to know. Then you can do it. So as far as they know and they are okay with it, you can profile them. Probably even Amazon, before profiling you, has told you that they are going to profile you. And you have probably given consent. It was written tiny. Probably they should have been writing this much larger than that. So there are a lot of things that we still have to learn. And then this GDPR gives key recommendations on what it is a data protection officer, the impact assessment you have to do, the breach notification. So before moving into AI, the point is be sure you know what it is a GDPR. And since now most of medical devices, I would say all of them, they have a digital component. You cannot do that without having digested the GDPR. So in my coming modules, there will be more and more about GDPR in your best interest. Okay, but I don't want to spend all the day about GDPR because this is just a prerequisite, thank you, for today's topic. So first of all, GDPR is relevant for AI, but it is not an AI regulation. It includes rules for fair data management and explanatory automated decision-making. So those are both very pertinent points for AI, which Alessia has spotted from the regulation, but it is not specific for AI. So it is not enough. There is more AI can do, can now generate new profiles. Should this be regulated? Yes, beyond the individual person. So GDPR is necessary, but not sufficient condition to rule AI. establishes the need for data protection, but again, it does not have to be misinterpreted. Is it the need for data protection because we have the right to share data, not an obligation not to share data? By the way, this does not cover all the AI things I want to do with your data. Why we are now focusing on AI? So I decided to introduce this slide because I realized that, especially in early career, this is not crystal clear. So I created this slide, which is as accurate as it can be. I'm not an historian, but let's start from that. Why we created the European Union in the 50s? What was happening in the 50s? 1950. What had happened 5 years before? The end of Second World War. And in which condition was Europe? It was a disaster. So we were in need of rebuilding all the town, most of the town. There is a word in English, which is Coventrify, coming from Coventry, because Coventry was completely destroyed. And now it's used in psychiatry. So you have this process of Coventryfication, completely destroyed from scratch. And Cecilia is raising an hand, so I will leave you the floor in a second. Now, the point is, in this moment, we were in need of rebuilding cities. What do you need in order to rebuild cities if you are in 1950? Which resources? Bricks? Electricity? People? We are not still bricking as if we were doing in the 80s. So this was brick and iron. And energy in the 50s, how was mainly Europe powered at that time? Nuclear bomb was just used 5 years earlier, so we didn't have nuclear plants yet. What was the main source of power for Europe? Coal. And is it not the chance that the first thing we did was the SECA, so the European Community for Coal and Acciaio, steel? That's exactly what we did in the 1950. Why? Because that's exactly what you were in need of in 1941. And then what happened in the 90s was that all the main, it's called the end of the Cold War and the falling down of totalitarism. So the last totalitarianism was in Eastern Europe, fell down in 89, no, with the end of the war. And now what happened from the day after, 1990? What was possible that was not possible before? Democracy was there, was not perfect, still is not perfect, but we have democracy since the Greek ancient time. But what was possible in 1990, which was not possible 2 years before? You are justified, you were not there, most of you. Moving around Europe, okay? It was now back possible to move from Eastern Germany to Western Germany and the other way around without being shot by soldiers, okay? There are still few walls in the world, but not in Europe. Well, in Europe, there is only one, but it's falling down. Now, if you are from the economical perspective and you see that people can move, what would you regulate then? The possibility for people to move around and work in any other European country. And that's what we had in 1992, the Maastricht Treaty. So those things does not happen because of nothing. There is an historical reason. And if you understand the historical reason, you understand where we are going and what we are doing next. And now what are we living? The so-called economy of service or economy of knowledge. What do you need in order to generate knowledge and services based on knowledge? Can you guess? Data. And that's exactly what we had then. In 1995, it was the first regulation on data, which was converted to GDPR in 2016. And now AI is coming. So guess what? We need the regulation of AI. We need now to allow company to move services, not people, from Italy to Germany. So I need to sell my service in Germany. If I need to sell my intangible services in Germany, what do I need? If it is a tangible service, I don't need anything. I can go and work in Germany as I am. Okay, better covered, fine. But if I'm selling intangible services, what do I need to share with Germany? With the buyer in Germany? Come on, guys. Data and data. Data and data. So I need to get information, process information, give you another information, intangible. So that's why we need the GDPR, because this is made of data. We need European data space for whatever domain. I am a biomedical engineer, I work on health, so I am focused on the European health data space, which is the wider regulation in Europe for fostering the data exchange. That's no different from the SICA. So what we did in 1951, this was meant to move around steel and coil, because this was the base for economy after the World War II. And now we are doing exactly the same on today BRICS. Today BRICS are data, information, and digital services. And that's what it is based on the European economy now. And that's why you need to have the European data spaces for everything: pollution, financial, health, and so on and so forth. We start from health, because if people move, they bring with them their germs, and they bring with them their right to be treated. So we need to allow people to move around Europe in a safe manner, being treated well, and being appropriately treated. Now, the European health, oh, sorry, Cecilia had the question. Cecilia, do you want to say anything? Or probably it was a random hand. Okay, please put down in the chat, and I will give anyone the floor in 15 minutes. European health data space. So this is the European ambitious initiative for facilitating the secure and standardized sharing of health data across Europe. I normally tell a story when I teach that. And this is why you have the distance you have among train binaries. No, come si chiamano I binari in English?
Railway.
The railways, okay? There is a standard distance from the shaft of metal from the right and the shaft of metal on the left. Why this is a standard measure? Do you know why we have this in Europe? And if you want to move eastern, you have to change train, because they use a different distance. Why we have this safe distance? Because it's the same dimension used by the Romans when they did the Appia road, because this was the standard dimension of coaches in Roman empires, which then propagated over ages. And then when trains were built, they used the same dimension, which was the standard as the Panama Strict, which is defining the definition of boats in Panama, because that's what you need to move from one ocean to the other. No, that's a de facto standard. And now, actually, we need to create de facto standards, and better than de facto, rightful and human right inspired standards. To make this possible, you need to take a coach which has been manufactured by anyone and allow this coach to move everywhere in Europe on the same railway, or different railways, because they belong to different people, but they have to be standard. Otherwise, I cannot sell you my train. And that's now a right for European people to sell each other goods and people. No, we don't sell people, but services offered by people. And now we want to do the same for data. To do the same for data and digital services, we create a unified and interoperable ecosystem for those data to be shared, stored, processed, analyzed, presented. Otherwise, we will still working in silos, and our European companies in one member state cannot sell in another member state. And the same for other coming from abroad, because that's also an opportunity to set a standard. If I believe that I cannot have a severe impact on the environment, so I have the greening regulations in Europe, then I don't want to allow to you to sell in Europe if you come from regions where you still have a huge impact on the environment. So we are posing rules which are inspired by our high values, and we want this not to become a problem for our companies. So the same standard has to be respected even by manufacturers which are in other than European regions if they want to enter the European market. Or according to some, that's a barrier to market, but we are not here to discuss that today. But the concept is the standard, quality standard, right of people standard, and standard or quality standard of what I'm selling. And now you should recognize the next slide because it's exactly the same schema as GDPR. That's great what that Alessia did. She made this as if she was an engineer, even more, an expert of philosophy and ethics. So she's making it easy for you to digest because she's using the same formulas and these click better in your mind. The purpose, sharing and access health data. This is now becoming specific because what we need for health could eventually be different from what we need for sharing financial data. No? So this is specific. Key objective, facilitate cross-border health data, because we realized that GDPR was interpreted as it was, as we commented before, and we need to compensate and be sure that now we can foster the sharing of data with a specific regulation, which is in the title, sharing of data. Support healthcare innovation and research. Guys, we are lagging behind other regions because we are fragmented. In Italy, we have 21 plus regional healthcare services. In the UK, we have 4. In Spain, we have more than 10. In Germany, the same number. So that's a problem all over Europe. So all European healthcare services and systems are regionalized. And sometimes one region has different standard than the other region. That's not possible. We cannot live like that. Otherwise, we are telling to other great nations such as India, China to, hey guys, take you the lead on AI. Unless we want to do that, which I am fine with that as well. But if that's the goal, to keep this leadership in Europe in research and innovation, we need to find a way to cross-border our data, to share our data cross-border. So that's exactly the challenge. And the source, hospital, clinics, research institution, they need to have the opportunity to safely share the data lawfully share the data. So according to the principle of GDPR, in an infrastructure which has been designed and the principles are in this European health data space, which is in the public domain for consultation, was supposed to be voted in Brussels by November. The current dramatic circumstances of the world war is refraining the parliament to focus on that, but otherwise the plan was to vote on that in November, so in less than 1 month. I hope still this parliament will do before the chamber will be dismissed, because we are having new election early next year in Europe, but the plan was to have this. So this has been published about a year ago for consultation, which means that organizations such as the one I mentioned before have had the opportunity to give input. Hey guys, last time you did MDR, you didn't mention AI. Probably now you should focus a lot on AI in the European health data space. And hey guys, probably we have to think about mechanisms such as shelving the service so that we can treat back who is using the service and eventually make it more responsible, which is what Giuseppe Fico is doing in a couple of large-scale pilots, and use eventually blockchain or whatever other media in order to make this more secure. But now you need to have the condition in order to share the data. That's the mindset. Before, we were trying not to share data, not me, but other people. But now the philosophy is the other way around. Hey, we have to do our best to share data. Otherwise, we will not grow. Otherwise, we lose the leadership in this important field in the world. Okay, that's the philosophy. The benefits, come on, I have been discussing about the benefits so far. Data privacy, we have to be compliant. We need to set the rules. Anonymized, pseudo-anonymized is the step forward, but it's not enough. Just because you have anonymized data doesn't mean you can share it. You have to consider that some data are, by definition, biometrics, and so you can recognize the person even if you erase the name, or that pseudo-anonymization is still part of the process. So you cannot share pseudo-anonymized data without due permission, without the patient knowing it, unless you had collected proper permission and you have in place a robust data sharing agreement. Okay, so there are things that we need to learn, but they are there. They are there. They are in the European health data space. They are a draft. They are in the GDPR, and there is plenty of literature telling you how to do that. Interoperability. So we are working on standard, FHIR, but not only, for making data in health compatible with the different systems. We are trying to define rules for better access and governance of data. And obviously, we acknowledge the fact that there are still open challenges such as data privacy concerns, technical infrastructural challenges, legal and ethical considerations. Both, because what we see is that even the ethical perspective can change from one nation to another, from one continent to another. So we need to consider that ethics can also be different if we move abroad Europe. And legal it is, because still many legal aspects are regulated on national state. Now, the idea here is to build on existing voluntary effort, the My Health at Europe infrastructure, without having to make it compulsory, but creating benefit for people to join this kind of infrastructure. We want to foster better access and exchange of electronic data, as I mentioned before. And we believe this will bring to better health outcomes for patients, better evidence, better conditions to work for healthcare workers, which is not absolutely trivial. And obviously, we have to be sure about the primary use of approach based to the new legislative framework of product legislation versus established common European rules and permits in terms of common safeguard of European citizens, also when things become untouchables. Okay, so there is the limit for the secondary use. I will share the slides so you will have time to digest this text. Now, the problem is the future outlook. So European health data space is a pillar for the European health strategy. Because of the fragmentation I mentioned before, we don't have in Europe the equivalent of a Ministry of Health. We do have in the Commission in particular, but they do not have the same power as they have in the Commission for other things, such as antitrust, such as economical dimension. So health was not embodied into the original act, constituent act for the European Commission. We are now trying to make things work better together, because especially the last pandemic event concretely demonstrated us that we cannot cope with large events, with the fast changing situation at national level. So we need an overarching infrastructure which does that, also from the political point of view. We need to expand the data sharing initiative. We want this initiative to be a catalyst for European healthcare transformation, and we hope this is an infrastructure for better health data management. And obviously, there is a roadmap. You have all the references in this slide, which I will be happy to share, and you can deepen this roadmap in your own town. The main point is that we need for consistency in the ethical guidance across these regulatory frameworks. The point is that when you don't have a strong regulation, you have only one opportunity to rely on ethics, because this is underpinning fundamental principles which then are embodied into the regulation, especially when you work cross-border. If you're using in Italy a Google service which is made by a company which is in the States, you have limited remit in acting on this company. Obviously, they have to accept some condition, otherwise they cannot enter the European market. But those are little tiny conditions compared to what you can do if this company is Italian. It's different, no? And so we are trying to build an environment in which we make convenient for international company to work in Europe and to respect this framework. There is a plethora of documents about ethics of AI. So just to go back to the point, AI is every time important. It becomes crucial in two conditions. When you are working in a space which is not yet strongly regulated, as it is AI, when you are working cross-border, because if you go in Africa, probably you don't have the same European regulation on medical devices. Certainly you don't. And so the only thing that you can stand on is your own ethics, because cross-border, you don't have one law which stands for all. And so we go back to ethics when something is completely novel. We should go back to ethics every day, but in particular, when something is completely novel or when we work on a global scale. Okay, now I want to go back to the European AI Act, which we don't have yet. So we are still defining. It is now being released for open consultation, so you can download and read, but you can already see where this is coming from and understand the underlying principle on which this act will be built. There is a roadmap. We started in 2021 with the white paper, and then in April 2021 was an important year also because of this proposal being laid down, aiming at harmonizing rules for AI, and so on and so forth. And then in 23, the text adopted by the Parliament was in the European Parliament for the first reading. That's the long ether for European regulation. And now basically it is out for consultation and public reading, which means that the full proposal is not there. It's the AI Act is not yet a regulation proposal, but it is going to become a regulation proposal with the new legislation, which will be starting in July 2024 after the election in the first term of 2024, hopefully. Now, what we have out in the public domain states, you recognize the same Alessia schema. So the key objective is assuring that AI systems are safe and trustworthy, as we do for medical device. First, it has to be safe, then also effective and cost-effective. The same for AI. First, it has to be safe, and then and then also effective. But in this case, we add the word trustworthy, because AI can be, by definition, black box. So you don't fully understand what the machine is doing. Therefore, you have to adopt trustworthiness by design, which is every time important. It's every time good. If you want to do that for medical device, you are more than welcome. But for AI, it has to be mandatory, because it's by definition something that people will not be able to read. Promote innovation and ethical conduct on AI. That's the ambition. Protect fundamental rights and values of European citizens and beyond. We want to protect everybody. Scope of regulation is to apply AI in a good manner in Europe, addressing high-risk AI systems. So you will acknowledge in the next slide the same mentality that we are familiar with for medical device, where more safe medical device, they have less steps to be followed in order to be CE marked, and more risky medical device, you have to go through a more complicated process. That's the same you have to do even for PP in Europe. And now we are applying the same reasoning to AI. It's the same reasoning you have to do for machines. So we have in Europe this approach. We make the less risky objects less regulated somehow, so equally regulated, but with less control. And then the most risky one, we introduce the principle of adding someone else helping you, checking everything is right, and more articulated processes to arrive to the rubber stamping of CE marking, saying that something is safe, trustworthy, and eventually effective. Key provisions: data documentation and record keeping. So as you have seen for medical devices, you have to go through annexes, which tells you exactly what you have to collect, what is the document that you have to bring in order to be granted CE marking for your medical device. The same is applying to AI. So there will be a technical file where you have to collect all the evidence from the very first start, from the very first moment. So start thinking in this light. If you are working in health and you are mostly biomedical engineers, so you have to think as if it was a medical device. From day one, when you sit and have an idea, you need to start thinking, hey, what should I put in my technical file? Because if you think at this after 2 years, 3 years after your PhD, unless you have a time machine, in which case, let me know. I want to see back a couple of Maradona matches, which I missed. Then you have to start from the very day one in order to collect this evidence. Otherwise, you are completely lost. At least you lose an opportunity. Conformity assessment. So exactly as for medical device, this path for the conformity assessment will be incrementally more sophisticated in relation to the risk associated with the use of the AI model. Data privacy has to be respected. Any regulation we do in Europe is as a release of new software. It has to be compliant with the former version. Otherwise, we would make a mess. So this act will be compliant with European health data space and compliant with GDPR, which are both compliant with MDR and ODIN. Enforcement of penalties. We still defer this to national authorities. That's the way in which Europe works. The same for MDR. In future, probably this will change. And we introduce fines for non-compliance. In this moment, it's a sort of Wild West, as we have seen when we started. We need sheriffs, and sheriffs put, you remember, la taglia, come si chiama? On crimes. By the way, so fines for misconducts. And this will be obviously impacting on business in case you do not adopt the AI regulation. Or you have to start asking yourself how this will impact my business, what I need to know, how do I have to design my company and production processes to be compliant with this AI Act. And guess what? It will be exactly the same as other regulations in Europe. If you read at least 2, medical device regulation and PP, which are the most appropriate for you to read, especially if you work in the remit of health and rehabilitation, then those are the two which will tell you the model. And the model, you will see it's exactly the same. So guess what? The next regulation in Europe will have the same mentality as the former. And for instance, in the next slide, I think Alessia exactly created this animation in which we will define a code of conduct, which is the minimum that people have to do for less risky AI things. So you don't need to get someone else to get the approval, but you have just to adopt a code of conduct. But then there would be more risky and less transparent things, such as a chatbot. And now you need to have a more structured process in order to get an approval and a CE marking in the end. And then you start having the ones which are high risk, and gosh, now you need a conformity assessment. So you remember the conformity assessment for medical device, class 1, 2, A to B, 3, or if you are an in vitro diagnostic, A, B, C, D. And the more you go into the risky situation, the more the conformity assessment requires different steps, total quality adoption, getting through a notifying body. We don't have yet those details, but in principle, this will be the same philosophy adopted for AI. Is it risky? No. Fine. Do you have a code of conduct? Fine. I trust you, therefore I trust your product. Is it risky? Yes. As much as I trust you, I need to trust the process in which you produce, through which you produce a medical device, and probably I want you to share whatever you have done with the notifying body. That's crucial. That's crucial. Last but not least, an acceptable risk AI. And we can even prohibit, guys. We are still in a civil continent, so we can prohibit things which are unacceptable. That's it. So do we do things just because we can? Yes, as far as this is not affecting freedom of any other human being or animal or tree or whatever. So we cannot accept anything in case we clearly see the risk for that. So there will be, according to Article 5, AI applications which will be completely forbidden in case the risk is unacceptable. Whatever we do in Europe, we balance risk and benefit. And there are some things which are too risky even to be allowed. And I really think this is last slide. So basically example of prohibited use of AI. So AI system that exploit vulnerabilities. This is already in the intention of the European Parliament to forbid that, which are used to be scoring citizens from health authority, from any authorities. No, we need to keep what Jacopo like most, democracy and social scoring will be forbidden. AI used for massive social scoring. Use real-time remote biometric identification. There is the intention to forbidden that. So the use of biometric system in public spaces may be allowed, but under strict regulation, under strict behaviors. So eventually the information has to stay there and just be functional to what you want to do. Hey, it's the same face on the, okay. But this has not to propagate, this has not to be exploited in any way, in any risky way. Materially distort behaviors. Anything which is using AI for materially distorting people's behaviors cannot be allowed. So the Article 5 will forbid those applications. It's in the public domain, guys. If you're working on AI and you didn't take some time to read how your continent is regulating AI, allow me to say you are not behaving as a PhD student. So be responsible, start reading this act, because that's the way in which your product will be regulated. And probably you want to know that from the very day one. And even choose topic if you don't like the way this is going to be regulated. It's your freedom. What is not admitted is ignorance in Europe. I really think this is my last slide. There are annexes. You can compare. You can go in details. I don't want to do that now. And ex post requirement vetted by conformity assessment. That's no different from what we do for medical devices once they are on the market. And final remarks, the recent updated EU regulation on medical device does not refer to AI. AI is informed with databases of the past, which could not be ethically aligned. I would say that more than 90% of human production was done in centuries where human rights were different by the one we are living today. So if they are discriminatory with the black people or with the woman, it's because they were written a couple of centuries ago. We can choose to burn them. I'm not of this opinion, obviously, but we need to keep them as an example of how stupid we can be. But AI system will not make this discrimination. So you have to be aware that most of chatbot kind of AI is probably reading books that you would not allow or permit to publish today. They are not considered ethically. We don't ban them. We are civil. There is something in Napoli which I love. It's the light under a fascist written. It's forever the fascism will last, blah blah blah. And as far as this will last, this fire will burn. And you think Neapolitan broke the? No, they just turned off the light. That's the best way we can behave with all the rhetorical and inappropriate things. Leave it there, switch off the light, and prove them it was wrong. That's it. But you keep it as a monitor. Otherwise, you should not keep the obelisk in Rome, because they were coming from a century in which you were leveraging on slaves. No, so we don't do that. We don't burn the past. We use it as a information to avoid the same mistake in future. But machine don't know, so they are learning from them. If you allow them to learn how obelisks were written in ancient Egypt without telling them that now you cannot exploit workers, slavery, probably the machine will think you can. So you have to be very carefully on how you train chatbot in particular, but any AI system. That's just an example. Systematic literature review conducted in 2022 reveals that the non-explainable AI is the new hot topic to address. Is there another slide, Alessia? Conclusion. AI Act gives a primary consideration to ethics, and we have already commented the reasons. AI Act responds to the need of a unique regulatory framework in Europe. We have already commented that for the European health data space, this is even more important for AI. Also to protect our position. We believe Europe is one of the most advanced continent and region in the world for human rights. That can be wrong, but I think we are not. And we want the most advanced regulatory framework to regulate the most important invention of the century, which, believe me, is not the plastic on the bottle top, which does not allow you to. This is not the most intelligent invention of the century. Let's be clear. It's AI, okay? And we want this to be regulated by us because we assume that after many mistakes, we now can do something which is not that wrong, okay? Last but not least, the EU AI Act is the first specific regulatory tool for AI adopted to such a large scale, but cannot be considered as the ultimate reference. So as MDR, when I teach you MDR, I tell you continuously, this is an evolving thing. I tell you the story, where this is coming from, because we don't know where this is going. But guess what? The past is the best proxy for the future. So if you see how this has evolved, you have a chance to understand where this is going. I am 2 minutes late, so I would rather stop here and take any question from you guys. Thank you. Questions? Cecilia said it was a mistake to raise her hand. Thank you, Cecilia. Any comment, question from the floor? Giuseppe, do you want to? Yeah. Alessia. No, Giuseppe is moderating. Just moderating.
So, really if this new regulatory framework can really address the problem of low resource setting not underrepresented in these regulatory thoughts.
Okay, no, this new act is not at all considering this issue, but you know we are very active from this point as IFMB, as scholars, you, me, and our labs. But the point is that, sorry, this blurring is annoying. Let me remove the blurring. I feel blurred, but just right. Yeah, just right. Okay, there we go. So, no, the point that Alessia is, and I repeat the question for those attending from remote. So, is this act considering the perspective on neighboring low-income countries or far low-income countries? Because in this case, the materialization brings the problem on a wide scale. No, we know that European regulations, they are criticized by me as a first person, because they create standard de facto, which create problems in neighboring low-income countries. For instance, the medical device regulation is creating unnecessary barriers, which are an issue for even European lower-income countries, are a dramatic issue for many lower-income countries. I think to Africa because that's where I work most, but certainly for other lower-income countries. Because they create standard de facto, they create barrier to the market, and as a result, you limit the number of solutions you have to solve pragmatic problems in Africa. Or they create standards which are not evidence-based. Sometimes those standards are not generated and do not follow the principle of minimization. So you have to create something which is safe, and no more than that. So you cannot add any extra burden just to create a barrier to the market. And now this is creating a barrier to access with an effective solution to a patient. AI is doing the same. So we need to think hard on how we can make AI accessible, how we can use AI to reduce the digital divide among Europe and Africa, for instance, but the same applies to many other countries. And no, we are not doing that. So if we don't invest more in infrastructure in neighboring country, we are creating a paradox here that Europe will become more and more powerful and rich, and Africa will lag behind. Because if we are now moving in this economy of information and you don't have the infrastructure to access, then we are creating necessarily brain drain, immigration, economical disparity, and all the social pressure, which then result in what we are seeing also today, not to mention democracy and war. Did I answer your question? So we have a lot of work to do, Alessia. Finish your ERC starting graph. Other questions, comments? Have you heard about those things before? Raise your hand if you heard about the AI Act or read it. Not many. And raise your hand if you are working on AI directly or indirectly. No one of you? Many of you. So guys, we have an issue.
More than those that raised.
Yeah,
as far as I know.
they are shy. They are shy.
At least as far as I know.
Fair, I don't blame you. Giuseppe.
Yeah.
Floor is yours.
Well, thanks for as usual, for those that are used to work with you, for the great vision and clarity that you shed on this important, complex, but also necessary complex topics. I have one question. Learning also from your talk today, it seems that we are always we are improving, we are depicting a better picture, but it seems that still we are missing some of this picture, and I'm talking about environment. So in our society, we are starting to talk about environment, and there are new regulations on toward that. Some of our colleagues from the clinical engineering community told us that maybe some of these algorithms to be trained 1 hour, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but 1 hour of training of an LLP algorithm may cost 40 flights forth and back between Europe and US. So as we learned from you today, when there is not the regulation, at least start with ethics. So what's your thought about that?
No, my thought is that I completely agree with you. You know my sensitivity to the topic, and I know your sensitivity to the topic. Thank you for the question. You were not with us to the bootcamp, were you? No, you
regulatory issues.
Regulatory issues.
Yes.
So you technically had the
I was there. My passport. Yes.
Because I'm asking, because this was one of the challenge we gave to one of the teams. So in the hackathon we did, the question was, A, we need system to assess the environmental impact of AI, but even even just the principle of minimization is something that you should apply. So do you really need to send this information? Can you process on board? And if you can, why should you do that? Or even in the way you write a WhatsApp message, write one long message. This will use much less energy than writing 10 small messages. And we keep doing this mistake. So we really need to learn about ecology in the digital age, first of all, and more about AI, because you are right. The data center is absorbing more power than a big town as Milan. This was the last I read, and is polluting and responsible for a significant part of CO2 emission. more than traffic. And now for cars, you have the Euro whatever, and for computational facilities, you don't have any energetic rating widely adopted. There are a few proposals. So this is an urgent topic. We have started working. And if you are in Europe, you are lucky because you can just mock as a monkey what has been done before. So apply the same underlying principle of the GDPR. Minimization, appropriateness, don't do whatever is not necessary, do it there. No, for data is localization of data is one of the principles. You do it there, don't transmit if you don't need it. The same applies to computation. Do it there, minimize, respect this, and that. And then whatever we do in Europe is compliant with former European regulations. So because we now have two strong environmental regulations, this new AI Act will have to be reliant to there. How this will up? Well, you know, you don't need to, we are thinking now to renewable energy in southern Italy. It's mainly solar power because we have a lot of sun, usually, not today. But the point is, why should I make the energy in Puglia to bring it in Milan to have a data center? Probably you can make the data center there and just move a tiny optical cable, which is certainly less impactful than the power. So even just displacement of computational capability is something that we have to think, opening great opportunity for Africa. I mean, why don't we make our data centers in Africa? As we, you know, we come si dice srotolare in inglese, I have no idea. How we put in place large pipe for petrol. No, don't think that people say, no, that's complicated. Hey guys, we have pipelines for gas and oil coming from Nigeria to Europe. If they have been able to put this pipe for oil and gases, I'm sure we can put a tiny optical fiber and reach the desert, Saharan desert for energy. Probably that's where we should put all our data center. This would solve Alessia's concern about ethics and universality. Meanwhile, bring us clean AI. Clean AI. Oh, that's something we should do. Clean AI. Clean AI. Oh, we think that the acronym. So completely agree with you. Too shy? Angry? Too Friday? Too Friday? Is there any question from those attending online? Paula? No questions. Is there anyone alive online? Yes, I see many people.
Yeah.
Okay. And Jenny, we were mentioning you this morning. We miss you.
Okay, so I would consider that this is just, as usual, a starting point. It's not a conclusive point, and many things are ahead of us as biomedical engineers. And as we said before, as a community in the right place to say that, we have many things to say, and it's our duty to inform with the methods, the techniques that we know, to all the other members of the communities. Not that it's on us, but we have something to say properly, and we need to interact with other professions that are better from us to state other parts of the story. So it's a call for action, and one of the things that worked better in Europe when I talked with many stakeholders was the Renaissance. So we are now, some of these persons says we are now, and we don't realize that we are in a European sort of Renaissance where knowledge is shared. So let's take profit.
What was common in Renaissance, Alessia? You are most historian.
The center was the person.
And what was, so the center was the person, and here on campus, that's one of our pillars. And what was the typicality of Renaissance scholar? That they knew a bit of everything. This was before Illuminists, before Descartes.
Leonardo, no? Is an example.
Leonardo is an example. So it was a genius of painting, art, music, whatever, and engineering. And this was far before Cartesio. And then Cartesio came, Descartes, and introduced this idea of deep specialization, which has been the end of Renaissance. So what we need now are more Leonardo da Vinci than Cartesio. So we need to have engineers working on regulatory frameworks, philosopher working on engineering, and artists working all together, as you do in Madrid.
In Spain, we talked about Ramon y Cajal, who was a great discoverer in neurologist, and he was a great, he was doing great drawings, and that was fundamental for the most important discovery in neurology.
So to have a new renaissance in Europe, we need the new renaissance scholars. So we need to be pushing ourselves harder, and not here on campus, but I know places where things happen in this lab and they don't talk with the neighboring lab, and they are afraid that you steal their knowledge lab to lab. So
that's something we have to work in Europe. To
otherwise, the renaissance is just a nice memory. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, guys, if there is no other question, I think it's lunch o'clock. No other questions? Fine. See you later.